Hello guys, before I begin today's video, there's something that I really want to say, which is that I am making a Q&A video soon, so if you have any questions that you want to ask me, be sure to leave them down below in the comments with some indication that it is meant for the Q&A video and not for today's video topic. Anyway, on to today's video. So recently the first chapter of Orient was published and I thought I would give my first impressions because I only just finished reading this chapter maybe an hour or two ago, and I just want to talk about it because it is interesting. It's very interesting based on the first chapter. It is of course made by the same mangaka who made Magi. As some people may know, Magi ended a while ago and this is his or her new series. I think it's her, and it feels kind of good. I mean, it definitely has some cliche themes to it, but at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think sometimes, especially in this day and age, you know, you kind of have to use something that's already out there. Like, it's really difficult to come up with a completely original plot and a completely original setting. But based on what we saw in this chapter, I think despite some of the familiar elements that we may have seen in other series, it really could become a successful series, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will, but it certainly has the potential to. So the main character and the main rival, or the friend of the main character, I guess you could say, they're called Musashi and Kojiro. Kojiro being the sort of side main character, I guess you could say, the secondary main character, and Musashi is the actual main protagonist. Their personalities really speaks a language in this chapter because we have the main character, you know, he's kind of a outgoing person, a really positive and joyful personality, whereas the other character, Kojiro, he speaks a completely different tone. When they were children, because we saw like a flashback, and in the flashback we obviously see how Kojiro is also like a really positive and outgoing person. You know, they really look up to Kojiro's dad because he was what they call a bushi, whose duty are to defeat the Oni, or the Kishin as they call it, which are like demons basically. They're demons that have invaded the world, creating chaos and warfare. And obviously at some point in the story, between when they were 10 years old and when they were 15, something must have happened, because you really get the sense that something drastic happened in this gap. When they were children, they were just looking up to the bushi, you know, they wanted to become a bushi basically, and then when they're 15, you get a really dramatic shift in the atmosphere around the place, because everyone seems terrified but also really happy to be serving the Kishin or the Oni, meaning something extreme must have gone down so that humanity would force humanity to believe that the Oni are good, when in reality they're really not. You know, they're really bad people, really bad guys who pretty much enslaves humanity to mine for them. But yeah, Kojiro's personality when he becomes older, it also changes quite a lot, because he becomes a more pulled back character. You know, you can really tell that he is not as outgoing as he used to be and as joyful as Musashi is, because Musashi still has that really outgoing and positive personality that most shonen protagonists have. But obviously Kojiro, being like the sort of a rivalry character, he's really dug himself deeper. You know, he is in a more depressed state, but at the same time he still has that positive vibe. It's just that he looks at the world very differently. He's a very honest person, you know, he doesn't want to believe in the lies, much like Musashi. But Musashi, he kind of creates this pretentious personality and this pretentious beliefs so that people will look up to him in a way, whereas Kojiro, you know, being the child of a former bushi, he has become kind of hated in the community because the bushi are basically made out as these evil people, whereas in reality it's the other way around basically. The bushi are supposed to be the good people, whereas the Oni are the bad people. So there's a bit of a clusterfuck going on, you know, but eventually, you know, everyone realizes the truth, like near the end of the chapter, when we actually get to see that the Oni are actually really bad. They're really treating the humans terribly. And can we just talk about the fact that they look like fucking cats, okay? They look like cats with horrific mouths. They look horrifying as far as a shonen goes. I mean, it's still within the shonen mold, don't get me wrong. Like, there's nothing that speaks seinen really, apart from the potential blood and gore, but it doesn't really get to that level where I would say this is definitely a seinen. I mean, it absolutely is a shonen. and I liked it. And I really liked the balance between the goodness and I guess comedy and whatever, as well as the dark and maybe bloody sides to it. I really like these themes put together, creating a somewhat great balance based on the first chapter. Of course, I mean, things could end up really differently depending on what path this series takes. I mean, you can't really read the first chapter and say this is going to be a great series. You can read the first chapter and say this may be a great series, may also be a mediocre series, maybe a bad series in general. You just never know. But I do have hopes that this series will become quite successful because, well, it's made by the creator of Magi, and although that doesn't necessarily mean by default that it's going to be a good series, it means that it definitely has the potential because Magi did really well. You know, it's not really a fairy tale situation where a lot of people can really tell the flaws and really shit on it. You know, Magi didn't really have, I guess, that level of imbalance. Magi was a lot better, I think. As far as the majority of the readers are concerned, I think most people would say Magi is a great series. Now, I haven't personally read Magi. I can only really say what I know from other people's opinions, but it doesn't really seem to have the same vibe to it based on what I've seen. I watched like the first 20 episodes of the first season of Magi, and it wasn't really for me, I'll be honest. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that this series is gonna be bad, you know? It doesn't mean that this is gonna be not for me, because this seems to have a very different theme and a very different story to tell. Some people have been saying this is kind of cliche in a way, which is probably true. Like, it has some cliche elements to it, I'm not gonna lie, even I can tell. But at the same time, I'm not really having a problem with it because, as I said earlier in this video, it's really hard nowadays to really create a unique and original plot and, you know, a setting that will be absolutely new to the community. You know, you're never gonna be able to do that unless you're like a god at writing, because everything has pretty much been done at this point. So for what it is, I'm just hoping this series takes the right approach to things that maybe some other series with similar settings and similar themes did not. Anyway, I'm going to end this video here, so let me know what you think down below in the comments. If you've read the first chapter of Orient, I'd love to know what you think about it, and if you did, be sure to Detroit smash that like button if you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't already, you should also subscribe to my channel, because why not? I mean, I mainly do My Hero Academia content, but occasionally I do other stuff too. Anyway, this has been Chaotic Plus, and remember everybody, Toga is waifu, Toga is Laifu.